Okay, so this morning I'm going to talk about how Rainbow Circle moved from being a pay at the gate on a sliding scale into being Magic Hat, and how it happened and what the implications were and how it panned out. So, Magic Hat was the idea that came over with the Rainbow Gatherings from America, and the American Rainbow Gatherings were set up in round about 71 and came over to Europe in the early 80s. And at the beginning of the 90s, I think 91, um, Jean Morningstar, TP Jean, and Les Dreamwalker, and a couple of other people from Rainbow Circle went over to Poland, to the Rainbow in Poland, the International Rainbow, mostly facilitated by the Americans, but based on the alternative community that was there in Poland. And it was a huge success. They came back completely blissed out. Me, I was a bit cynical about it at the time. The next year, it happened in Poland again, and that wasn't such a good scene. That's another story. But in 1993, the International Rainbow came to Ireland, and I went with Fred and Johanna in Johanna's van to Ireland and got completely blissed out, just as TP Jean, Les Dreamwalker, and the others had been previously. So we came back, and I was no longer anti Magic Hat, the Rainbow Circle going Magic Hat. And over the next couple of years, possibly, I became very much more enthusiastic about that possibility for various different reasons. However, when we started to do that, when we started to implement it, it was probably not done in the most efficient way, because when you think about it, we had a sort of clientele, people who came every year. They loved our camps. They came from London, from Manchester, from Liverpool, from the cities. They came to our camps. They loved them. They went home. They spread the word. But they came on holiday. They didn't come to be part of a commune of equals, really. They came to experience what we were providing. Now, when you start looking at the Rainbow Gatherings and the Magic Hat camps, you realize that the ethos of the Rainbow is that people pay what they can afford, and they make also huge contributions towards the running of the situation, of the camp, of the gathering, whatever. Now, none of us had been to America, so we had the European gatherings to go on. And what we didn't really see was how much energy went into creating the ethos of let's all do it together. And what you experienced when you went to Rainbow Gathering, at least at first, is that all the work of the gathering is done by the people who arrive. But actually, you realise after a while that an awful lot of work went in beforehand to set up the situation so that when people arrived, they could take over the jobs that had been done by the Rainbow Crew. The Rainbow Crew is whoever turns up to the what do you call it? The
Seed camp.
seed camp. That's right. Thank you. Whoever turns up to the seed camp, and so in a way, our situation with Rainbow Circle was that we had a crew, and we were effectively the seed camp, and then people came and they didn't have to cook the meals, they didn't have to dig the ship pits, they didn't have to work out the water system. They just came for a holiday. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But when you suddenly take that away from them, they're sort of not really quite knowing how to cope with it. And they don't have to pay anything at the gate or previous, they don't have to have tickets or anything. They pay what they can afford. And, families who would come with maybe 2 adults and 2 or 3 children, and normally they would have ended up paying, even on our really sort of low rates, they would have ended up paying at least 100 quid. But they never, and not only that, they would be paying for their meals. But when it came to actually putting money into the Magic Hat, there wasn't the same amount of money coming in. Let's just put it that way. There wasn't the same amount of money coming in at all. Not only that, but when we had ticket camps, we had a crew. And when we had Magic Hat, we had people who were not necessarily going to get up in the middle of the night to fix a dripping tap, because it wasn't their job. They did have that skill, but they didn't have to put in that level of energy. What I'm trying to say is that what happened was, instead of the crew people feeling that they had the privilege of camping with us, being part of this great family in return for their work, they were now just part of this great family anyway, and if they chose to do some work, that was great. And that is fine as long as the people who are coming to the camp actually understand that that's what's going to happen, understand that they need to put in energy, understand that the Magic Hat that goes round after the at the food circle, they understand that that is where they put their contribution to the camp, not just a couple of quid for some food. So it started to be quite difficult to hold the camps together on a physical level. We started to bring in the concept of the magic hat in the year 2000 after the 99 eclipse. And in the year 2000, it was decided nobody wanted to take on a particular camp. Nobody wanted to. We were all exhausted. I was in Australia by then, I think. But anyway, what was decided was there would be one long summer camp. I think there was Beltane and children's camp as well, but the summer camp would be one long everything camp. And I think I was back from Australia by that time, and I came to that camp. I remember being at that camp, and it was so unfocused and so unorganized and all over the place. And for me, it didn't work very well. I have to say that previous to this, when we decided to go Magic Hat, I'd written several articles about it and put it in the newsletter. I had this strange expectation that when you sent people newsletters, they read them. But actually, I now know from the fact that I get loads of newsletters for this, that, and the other, that you don't. You flip through and think, oh, that might be interesting, I'll read that bit. But you don't read it cover to cover like I used to with the Rainbow Circle magazines, newsletters. And I don't suppose anybody else did either. So the idea of the Magic Hat, the philosophy of the Magic Hat just wasn't there in consciousness of the people who turned up at the gate expecting to have a holiday. What also happened at that camp was, because there was no gate ticket and word got out, we had a lot of people who had never seen before arrive at the camp and try and do their money-making trip. So we had, we had all sorts of people. I won't go into all of that. But we had a lot of people who had not been before, who'd come because there was no ticket price, and who were not contributing towards the ethos of what we were trying to do. And I have to say that from then on, things didn't get hugely better. I think the next year was a lot better. 2001, I think, was better than the previous year. And it wasn't, I don't know. What I observed is that, and still do actually, is that there are a certain number of people who want to hold that energy and put the camps on and keep it together, but there aren't enough. There aren't enough people, there aren't enough workshops, there aren't enough energy holders. And I think it's not that the Magic Hat itself, that whole concept, that way of running things, is in itself the issue. I think the issue is that we had a certain ethos, a certain clientele, a certain way of doing our camps, and suddenly, zoom, it all changed. I mean, for me, it wasn't suddenly, because we've been talking about it for years, and when you've been talking about something for years, you think that other people have had it at least in their head that it might happen, but it certainly didn't go well, and I feel quite sorry that I was one of the ones who tried to make that happen and made it happen in the end, and it really didn't work out for us. I don't know how it pans out these days because I haven't been part of Rainbow Circle now for many years, probably good 15 years, maybe 18, probably not quite as much as 20, because I remember being part of the crew that went to the Yorkshire Rainbow Gathering in England, which I think was 2006. And I think we, Rainbow Circle usually do camps all the way through the summer. And the Rainbow Gathering was going to be new moon to new moon, right in that time when we would normally be doing camps. And me and a few others managed to convince, firstly I convinced John Cano, I think that was quite important, but we convinced the Rainbow Circle AGM not to do camps during the time that the Rainbow Gathering was happening, so that we could support the Rainbow Gathering. We, after all, were one of the main rainbow organisations, but certainly camping organisations in England, and I felt we had a responsibility to be there supporting the Rainbow Gathering, which was amazing. It was coming to England. Anyway, we did eventually pass that resolution, but it was by no means unanimous. And there were a lot of people who felt that we were betraying the Rainbow Circle and giving our energy to some other organisation. However, we did go and support the Rainbow Gathering. We took, me and Sue, Rainbow Sue, we sorted out a load of cycling stuff. George was also in there, packing the lorry. And Sue drove the lorry to Yorkshire, to the site of the Rainbow Gathering. And we organised it all, we unpacked it all. What did we take? We took the big lodge and we took 3 big domes. And I'll tell you, if we hadn't had those structures there, we would have really been in trouble, because amazingly, this is summertime. There was a hurricane. A hurricane came and completely devastated the whole. It wasn't that it devastated the site. Okay, the site got a bit muddy, but it was quite a stony site, so it wasn't that bad. But the thing is that we'd got lots of international people who had come, and they had come from Italy and Mediterranean lands and Europe, and they came with their beautiful rainbow flowy flimsy dresses and skirts and things, and they didn't have huge great winter blankets that you needed to be in Yorkshire when there was a hurricane. Fortunately, the 3 domes that we'd taken were reconstructed into a huge communal space with lots of little alcoves off it, and 3 stoves in it. We took our stoves as well, and it provided a real well-needed shelter for a lot of the people who came. And another thing that happened was that Raga organised an Oxfam drop-off at the end of one of the morning circles, so that people had some warm clothes. It was a huge, great lorry load of stuff came and just got dumped in the middle of the circle, and everyone went and took what they wanted. It really saved the situation for many people. I had a dome at that point, and my dome was also a refugee centre. Fantuzzi was there. I don't know. I don't know what. I think he had his own. Yeah, he had his own setup. I don't know. Must have been a tent or something. Maybe he had a teepee. Because I doubt if I can't see him in an Island Nightmare somehow, and he didn't need help in any way. He wasn't needy, you know. And he told lots of stories around the fires, and that was great after the hurricane had blown over. But it went on for several days, about 3 days, and we were completely exhausted by the time it all finished. And then we did the full moon ceremony, and that photo up there is me with a big corn sun. Kasia Morris was there, and she made these beautiful corn dollies that she and I took around the circle at supper time, talking about the ceremony, telling everybody, you know, where it was, when it was, how it was going to happen. Everyone knew something was going to happen, but this was, you know, detailed instructions. And we went, and also before that, Kasia had made these. It wasn't just her, but she organised it, and it was her inspiration and design. And because she used to make them, I think, as a child in Poland. But anyway, she could make them, and she did, and she made this beautiful sun, and she also made a moon. And I had the sun, and she had the moon, and we played out our parts in this this closing ceremony, which was sorry, not closing ceremony, full moon ceremony, middle of the gathering, because we start at the new moon, we end at the new moon. The full moon is the middle of the gathering. It's the main energy event. Everything builds up to the new moon, and afterwards people do start to drift off, and the atmosphere changes, and it changes into a much more sort of skill-based workshops, where people are actually wanting to learn things rather than wanting to create something for the full moon. They are now wanting to learn how to do this or learn about that. And that it just changes the atmosphere after the full moon, when a lot of the people who have come for that full moon energy, they start to drift off. So at the end of that gathering, well, what happened was that the Rainbow Circle had held that space open, but one of the women who really didn't want that to happen decided to start her camp. She was going to coordinate, I should say, the astrology camp, and they were in Derbyshire by this time. So she started her camp the day after the Rainbow Gathering closed. Now that sounds okay, except when you realise that she needs setup time, and that we will therefore have to take down the structures that we'd taken to the Rainbow before the end of the Rainbow, so that we could get it back to Rainbow Circle as we had agreed, and we did actually do, get it back to Rainbow Circle in time for them to set up for their camp. And I thought that was really mean, and she could have held off for another few days, but that's how it was. And Sue, once again, drove the truck back to the Derbyshire site. She was a real hero, Sue was that time. And I stayed until the end and I did the closing ceremony. And then we drifted back here to Glastonbury. Oh yes, another thing I remember is that during the hurricane, my daughter Sarah, who was up there with me, she decided she was going to escape the hurricane. We'd already been in it. We'd been in it at Callanish. We'd been up to the major lunar standstill in Callanish, and the hurricane had been there. Then it must have followed us down. So we'd had enough of it, really, and she decided to come back to Glastonbury, and she brought a whole carload of people back here, and they had, I think they had about a week in my house. But that was an escape. But then, I don't blame them. It was pretty full on. So anyway, then we all came back to Glastonbury, and some of the people who had come before came back with us, and chilled out here.